everyone, and speak up, please give me the answers. What is the great equalizer?
Well, now you have a lot of using digital technologies. You have a lot of courses online. You have Khan Academy, which I know a lot of people in the villages are using online courses.
Khan Academy is great, online education.
Yeah, and then in higher education there are the MOOCs courses. There are, boys in Mongolia who are onto MOOCs courses, which could be from Stanford or Harvard or wherever.
Anyone familiar with the MOOCs courses, the online courses, right? This group probably is. But what if you had no computer?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. What would you do? How would you get educated?
Need a teacher.
Go for it.
Mothers have to educate.
Mothers do have to educate.
Intuition.
Intuition's great, right? So we have formal education and we have informal education, right? Informal education I would look as street smarts, things you learn from mom. Yeah, please.
Service learning.
Service learning, absolutely, right? So, I'm reminded of an incident that I thought about the other day. I happen to have a nonprofit that does microfinance projects around the world and teaches social enterprise as another vehicle for change to teenage girls, because they're our next generation and they can be of service and still have a for-profit business, right? At one point we went over to Tanzania, and there was a whole group that was very interested in working in this village with these women and bringing them the water filtration, right? They didn't have clean water, and so this group out of University of Texas was really excited about bringing this. And what the women said to them was, this is phenomenal, but we don't even have water. It's great to filter the water, but we don't have water. We have to walk for miles with a jug on our head down to the well, so just getting water to us. So what happened was we came in first, or this particular group came in first, with the solution without asking the questions first, like what's the problem? So many times in education I think that we come in and we're going to fix things, but we never go back and say, what is the great equalizer? How do we get it to everybody, right? So, having worked with all these women that don't even have running water, they have no electricity, for me, abundance is the great equalizer for education. Because if you're poor, you don't have a computer. You probably don't even have electricity. And I'm going to say that probably the statistics, they vary all the time, but a good solid 90% of our planet is poor. Right? I mean, India certainly has a high level of poverty. It's all out in rural areas many times, although the cities do too. But they can't even get to the education part, right? So it's the chicken and the egg. If I don't have the education, how am I going to learn, right, to go make money, to start a business? But on the other hand, I can't get the education if I don't have the money. So for me, microfinance, particularly at that point in time, it's social enterprise, and we'll talk about this afternoon, I'm going to be talking about how to set up social purpose companies and why they're really important right now. But social enterprise, where people can have a for-profit business and still be in service, is a great way to go. And I encourage most people to have whatever business you have, whether you have a service business or whether you have a product that you're selling, that you incorporate some form of give back, some form of social purpose within your company. So what we saw from our women in Tanzania was they would go take, who is familiar with microfinance? Anybody? A number of people, right? So they go and they're going to take maybe a $20 loan, a $12 loan. I was very fortunate to have Dr. Muhammad Yunus as a mentor to me. He's truly a very, as you know, special person. And he started with a $12 loan or something like that in one of the villages in Bangladesh. So it's not charity, right? So they then can take the loan and they can pay it back 50 cents at a time, 25 cents at a time, because these are people that are unbanked, right? They truly are disenfranchised, unbanked. But they can begin to pay it back, and guess what happens? So we talk to our women over there and we say, what's going on now? You were able to buy this cow, you were able to have some milk, sell it, give it for your families. Now their kids are going to school. Why? They have money for education. They have money for uniforms, transportation to the schools. And the next generation is doing perhaps secondary school, you know, and they'll take out 4 and 5 of these loans. So I just, you know, wanted to take, because this was supposed to be like a 5 or 10 minute chat on this, on a panel, and say, you know, the great equalizer for education, we spend a tremendous amount of time talking about how we can fix broken systems. But I think we need to go an awful lot farther back and say, what do we do for the folks that don't have any education at all in the more impoverished nations? Because with education, you're going to have a much better chance of having peace on this planet. Why? With education, you're going to get to feed your family. You're going to get to have school, and you're going to have a broader view of the world. There's a chance you'll even get to go travel and meet other people. And what happens with that? Our minds grow, right? So there's a much better chance for equalization on this planet and for peace if we can figure out ways to help this bottom of the base of the pyramid, as they call it, right? So, curious, any thoughts on that? Anyone disagree or agree?
There is, you know, in India, we're talking about you know, the need to make people aware about the importance of education. Actually, that part is fairly simple because it's quite a core value in India. So even if you go to, let's say, a village in West Bengal at the border between West Bengal and Bangladesh, which would be really the poorest of the poor, and these would be maybe growing bananas, getting some sort of a minimum price for the sale of their bananas. If a factory would come, it would raise the price, but otherwise there would be middlemen. So these would be like people who would be the poorest of the poor, who would be eating one meal a day. And there are like recorded conversations, and if you actually go and speak to them and say, okay, we'll get this factory here, we'll raise the price for the bananas that you get from, let's say, 4 rupees to 10 rupees, what are you going to do with its additional income? And the first answer of the father, of the mother is, educate my children.
Education.
And there is such a hunger, and it's such a core value in the middle class fabric. And I have people here who will probably, Shalina and Andrea and Gunjan, you will tell me about it. As I don't know about Africa, if somebody wants to say, but in India for surely, it's such a core value that even if you bring the slightest access, the slightest, non-formal, formal, whatever, the slightest access, people are so ready to take it.
Yes.
And sacrifice survival for education.
Yes, and it has to be offered, though. There has to be a place where it's offered
Of course,
up,
of
right?
course.
And I think that's the tough part. In some of these nations, not nations, villages, we're saying, because that's too generalistic, right? But they don't even have the access. The hunger is there, right? I've taught at schools in Bukoba in Tanzania, the young women's school. They're willing to get there at, well, they sleep there all the time, but the families will put them there, and they start working in the fields at 4 so that they can go to school to come back and work late into the night, right? So the hunger is there, but we need to provide means of access to education rather than trying to necessarily just fix. And someone else mentioned this here in the conference. Fix things that are broken, that's great. I think she was talking about environmental issues.
Yeah.
Let's start at the beginning and go, how do we provide access? Because with access, so many of our issues will be, I believe, solved.
And also,
Yes.
I think what you, sorry,
Yeah, so one thing which, you know, I'm involved with a non-profit organization which is kind of like a social enterprise called Child Family Health International, started by a Stanford professor, Dr. Evelyn Jones. One of the things which has worked for us is we take American pre-meds, medical students and so forth, and we send them to Africa or India or other places, small villages, and these students actually pay money to the university. So they get 2 units from Princeton or Berkeley and then they go there, but they do service learning. It's kind of like Peace Corps, but it's Peace Corps for health education, global health education. So in the village, they're getting a lot out of it because they're understanding HIV/AIDS or tropical medicine or maternal health in Oaxaca, Mexico. But then they also contribute back to the health education in that neighborhood or community. And we've now had like 5,000 to 6,000 students, you know, gone through these programs. And the model is kind of self-sustaining because parents pay for the students to get the education in the, you know, from the university. These students go for 3 months in the summer. They serve in the village, The villagers are very happy because they learn some things and they meet somebody from another part of the world. So it's just a frame.
Immersion trips are huge, and it's that same idea. If they have the money to travel, you will learn, right? And so I know Shelley Hunt offers amazing immersion trips through Women for Global Change. We used to offer immersion trips through Women's Global Network, the organization that I started, and I often found that the people that went on the trips actually learned more than the recipients of the loans, right? Because they had never witnessed poverty at such a deep level. And they came back truly changed and advocates.
Also, I think in terms of the models of offering solutions, we had one session of the WEF at the annual event, and the ladies from Africa were talking about a group like that, Service Learning, which came to resolve the water problem in the village because the women had to really walk a lot to get the water. And they found a solution, and the village women actually came and complained, and they said, why did you do that? Because that was our time away from the family to walk over for water, connect, exchange stuff. So we didn't want the solution.
Because no one asked them, what do you need?
Yes,
right?
yes,
Don't we have to start with the question, what do you need first before we decide for another human being what they need, right?
In fact, one of the exercises we did, and this is just kind of touching on a very near and dear thing to me, is that we had this whole vision of let the world, we're going to go change the world. We actually changed the entire dialogue to the tagline for CFHI now is let the world change you.
Wow, beautiful,
Yes.
beautiful.
And so the whole idea is not so much that I'm going to go change a village or make an impact there. I'm going there to change myself. And in that journey, I touch people's lives and drive education, and health education is our focus, global health education. But it's very applicable in any other discipline of education, we believe, and we just have a narrow focus on global health education, but I feel that that model, in some form or fashion, can actually be applied to harness the power of youth and our young students in education, and actually let them go to other parts of the world and experience the world, but change themselves primarily, but in that process also impact the local communities.
Crowdsource learning in a way, you know.
So when you were there in Tanzania, you've taken me back in time. That's where
She's
I'm
from Tanzania.
Oh, really? Oh, I loved it.
1
Yeah.
hour from Bukoba, morning Mwanza. So while you were, and I've done the water projects, I'm fully aware of what you're talking about. So did the government get involved in bringing something to the table?
You know, the
The
group,
reason
the
I'm asking
NGO that
about
we
this-
were working with in Tanzania originated with, what we did was we started a women's co-op over there. And so, of course, we would fund the capital campaigns that were in country. And I believe, as I recall, the local city councilmen and more at a local level would get involved with the groups and stuff like that. And you have to have that, or you can't really, particularly if you're going to start digging anything. I mean, you can go bring water hippos and you can bring water filtration. Some of the other stuff, no, right? So yes, I think you have to get them involved, but that creates a whole bunch of other stuff. But the women all came together, formed a cooperative. We put the money into the cooperative, and they started soybean plants. And they began to start, every level they would take up, they would invest into the next. So the cow suddenly became an agricultural project. And that project became a soybean factory. So it just was this constant mutation of different level. And the kids continued to go because now the parents had the money. My biggest question, honestly, before I close out, because I know we could talk about this all day, but I thought dialogue might be a good thing to have, right? I said to the women, how is this affecting your relationships with your husband? Because, you know, is the husband going to feel threatened that now the wife is bringing in some money? You know, and is that going to create some physical abuse problems and stuff? Because, honestly, that does happen. It happens everywhere. In wealthy societies and poor, there's a threat. And every single one of them said to me, which I absolutely loved, our husbands are so supportive. They're right here with us. We haven't learned how to read, but they did, because the families allowed them to go on farther in the schooling than the girls. Many times the girls barely got through primary, right? But they were making sure that their daughters were going to secondary. And one of the women had taken out 5 loans, told me that now her oldest daughter was going on to college. So I just wanted to say the great equalizer for me, for education, is that we somehow make sure that abundance comes to all of us and that we share. And then, you know, so many things will change. But anyway, that was my 5 minutes. So. And a lot of it, I have moved into the world of social enterprise lately because I'm very interested in that. I mentioned the nonprofit earlier that we have, the work we do overseas in microfinance projects, and we also have the Teen Leadership Program for girls. But everyone is, I'm finding these days, a little bit confused about what's going on out in the marketplace. I have clients coming to me asking me about how should I structure a social business, what is a social purpose business. So I thought I would take a few minutes and just give you a little idea of the trends and what's going on, and see if that might be helpful or something that you might be interested in. So, you know, what is social responsibility? They're not even calling it social responsibility so much anymore. They're beginning to really use the word social innovation. Used to be we talked a lot about corporate social responsibility, but the truth of the matter is that all of us need to be socially responsible, whether we're a sole entrepreneur or whether we're a corporation. So we're not talking that much anymore about corporate social responsibility. We're talking about, you know, social innovation. What can we do to make changes in the world as a business today? So when we look at the words, you know, what we're seeing is that we are becoming businesses everywhere that are very interested in values-based business. Historically, when you thought of corporations, right, the only measure was how much was the rate of return to shareholders, to the investors. It wasn't so much what are we doing for our community. We left that to the nonprofits. The nonprofits were anointed with saving all of the problems in the world today, and the for-profits were just about making money. And the sectors are beginning to blend. What social responsibility is not is charity or philanthropy anymore. It's a much more holistic approach to the way that you run your business, right? You're concerned about your employees now. You're concerned about green initiatives. You're concerned about a rate of return, but no longer is it a check that we write over here for charity, and that's the only thing we do for social responsibility. Anymore today, the way you run your business, even if you're a lawyer by yourself or a psychologist, we have all kinds of folks in here, you have to include all these measures within your business today. So a little history about social responsibility and corporate social responsibility. You know, it's not something that just came up recently. It goes way, 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 way back. When you think about all of the distrust and everything that was going on, there was the slave trade, the sugar slave trade years and years ago. Citizens got together. It was before we had things like the internet. It was before we did have printing presses, so they got together and they were making pamphlets and going, oh my God, don't buy this sugar. You know, we have the slaves out in the field that are harvesting it, and everybody got very upset about that. It was kind of the beginning of social responsibility as an impact measure. They reduced that slave trade product by a large percent. It came on later on, we began to see the industrial movement, right? You started seeing things like what's going on with child labor, what's going on with women's labor. You know, citizens got very worried about these kinds of things, and you began to see new legislation about those two things, child labor, women labor. You move into the days of Ralph Nader. Consumers were going, oh my gosh, we've been deceived in all these banking documents, or oh my gosh, as citizens, you know, we need to be worried about whether someone's going to run into the back of the car and it's going to explode, right? So it began to move into that. And then lately, in these last 10 to 15 years, what's really been disconcerting is all of the stuff that's going on in terms of CEOs that have been indicted. There's a trust measure in our investment community. We don't want any more Bernie Madoffs. We don't want any more Ken Lays at Exxon. We want to know that we can trust the very corporations that we are doing business with. So this idea of social responsibility has gone from kind of a defensive ad hoc approach to being part of the very DNA and the fabric of corporations today. It's now the norm. It's not something that's a nice to have anymore. So the sectors are beginning to collide. And by sectors, I'm talking about the citizen sector, which would have your investors or would have your consumers, or and then that's beginning to collide with the nonprofit sector. Whereas the for-profits are going, oh my gosh, I need to make some I need to help the community in solving problems. The not-for-profits are going, oh my gosh, we're having a hard time finding donor dollars anymore. Right now there's Harvey and hurricanes and fires in California and earthquakes in Mexico, and who is going to help the smaller not-for-profits that are out there? We better start running our business like a business. So they're beginning to look for revenue models. Like, what can we do without getting in problems with, I'm going to say, tax authorities, because they're getting too much revenue in there. And then we're beginning to see in that citizen sector impact investors. So I don't know if anyone knows what that is, but now we're finding investors are going, I don't want to just invest in you because you're giving me a solid rate of return. I want to invest in you because you're a good company to invest in. Perhaps I really don't want to invest in a company where anyone smokes, or so that we don't want you to have in your portfolio Philip Morris. They're beginning to look at screens and stuff. So they're having a big play in our marketplace out there. So this idea of all of the sectors beginning to collide and come together and work together is actually very, very exciting. So how many people used to buy, I say used to because it's turned into sort of cause marketing, right? But it used to be that people would buy clothes if it had a little thing hanging out that said 10% goes to the rainforest, right? That was really cool when that started. We thought that company was pretty cool. Now we see it, all the time. Or how about the people that had the little things in the hotels that said, please, use your towels over and over and over again. You're saving water. Well, actually, you're just saving the hotel on their water bill. You're probably not doing much to impact anything. And so that's what happened. Consumers got very savvy and said, this is greenwashing. This is cause marketing. You guys don't really mean it, because look at the rest of your business. You may have left that down on, for us to pick up the dirty towels, but the truth is you are not handling your employees well. You're doing a bunch of other things too. So we don't think that you guys really are socially responsible. You're just using this as a ploy. And so they got pretty savvy about that. And customers and consumers and citizens are what I call digital tattletales. Who knows word of mouth, right? You research everything. Don't you research everything? I do. I research everything about the product or the company. First thing we do is go to Google, right? And we immediately find out if they mean it. And if price and quality is the same, what are they going to buy that product on? Probably the integrity of the company, right? If price and quality is the same, they're going to figure out if this is a good company that's serving a purpose out in the world. They're going to look at Facebook. They're going to look at Twitter. They're going to look at blogs. There's a million sources that they can go to really study that company. And these impact investors have created consumers and stuff have created a lot of change. So never think for a split second that you don't have a huge impact in your voice, because you do. This is a pretty heavy-duty slide, so we're probably not going to spend a lot of time because we won't want to go to lunch. But what I will say is that this generation of millennials, and now of course I was speaking with a young lady yesterday, and it's whatever the next generation is. I think it's the hashtag generation. They're already out. They may not be in the workforce in full force yet, but they're out there. They're service-oriented, right? And so the things that they're requiring, the way they work, how they want to work at their companies, I got to tell you, I have two daughters, a 33-year-old and a 29-year-old. They don't want to work the hours that I put in as a lawyer all those years. They saw that, single mom, all that kind of stuff. They're like, are you kidding? We want to go do more service-oriented. So although they do need to make some money, it's not as critical to them as it probably was in our generation. It may become so once they have kids of their own, but it's not right now. But they are absolutely affecting the marketplace. So if the millennials are saying, I don't want to watch what my parents lost their jobs, all these financial messes that were out there, we want everything to be transparent. And of course, they love WikiLeaks and everything else, right? We want everything to be transparent. The marketplace is responding with corporate governance. If they say we want to make a difference, the marketplace is saying we want to buy from companies that are socially responsible. If they say we want to work as part of a team, there are cross-sector partnerships that are going on. We want educational opportunities because they do. They're hungry for education. I think we all are actually, but they're hungry for education. So online universities, many of them couldn't finish brick and mortar universities when their parents lost their jobs. There's a lot of fabulous online universities out there. They're using that as other mediums. Plus they're realizing they may not need that four-year certificate anymore. There are other ways to learn. And it may be Khan or it could be MIT has got all of their source on all of their curriculum online. So there's other ways. They're super interested in flex time. They don't want to work the same hours, so that's showing up in the place. They're looking at CEO equalization. They're going, why should we work this hard and the CEOs make $6 million and we're making $6 an hour? So all these things are bubbling up out there in the marketplace because of these future generations that are coming in. So as I said, whereas the for-profit sector is moving from value-based, only shareholder return, to values, and the nonprofit is moving from values over to a little value, we're ending up with what this particular talk was about, with hybrid structures out in the business world today. So there is a company called B-Lab. I don't know if any of you have heard of B Corps. They are global, so they're not just US at all. They were formed in 2006. It was a couple of guys that came together and said that they wanted to make sure that there was a way that they could assess companies that wanted to show up well in the world. And you could go online and you could take an assessment, and I mean, you still can, right? You go online, you take an assessment, and if you can meet the criteria of that assessment, you can tell the world that you are a socially responsible business. It is a certification. Okay, so it's not a legal entity. It's a certification process. But what has happened with B Corp is that this, what I'm going to call soft law, because it's not legislative law, it's just, by soft, I just mean that corporations might put their own ethics codes in, or they might create their own accountability standards. That is beginning to codify now thanks to B-Lab. So B-Lab came in and they began to create impact assessments. Like, how do you measure the impact that you guys are doing in the world? Because if you can't measure it, what's the point, right? If you can't tell the world and other people around you, this is what I accomplished, go spend your money somewhere else. All right? Don't waste your money on things that you can't show you impacted. So they've created standards to do that. And then they began to go in and they began, at least in the United States at any rate, they began to go in and they began to request state senators and legislatures to actually come up with a new type of corporation. So the United States, in 33 states now, has passed, Texas was the latest one this last year, has actually passed a new law for benefits corporations, whereas we could elect for C Corps or B Corps or anything else. We can now have a benefits corporation, which allows a company to use their funds for social purposes, a for-profit company and not a not-for-profit, for social purposes, and they don't have to be worried all the time that they're going to end up in a shareholder lawsuit. This is huge. Delaware, which is kind of the bellwether state where people form a lot of corporations, is also one of them allowing this. Now, Canada, I took a quick look. I am not a Canadian lawyer at all. Isabella might even actually have a little more information on that. I can't tell if she's here today, but they don't actually have benefits corporations, but they do have a couple of other types of entities that are the same kind of hybrid corporations. So there's reporting criteria so that they can keep the transparency that everything wanted. They have to put up the reports publicly. So you can actually go online and you can look and see, is this company walking the talk? Are they just advertising? Are they walking the talk? Is this the kind of company that I want to actually work with? And you can post their logo on your products. King Arthur's Flour was the first. Patagonia was the first in California. At this point in time, there are 2,263 B Corp certified companies in 50 countries, 130 industries, and the one unifying goal is, of course, that they are socially responsible and letting the world know that they are. Takes about a couple hours to take the assessment to see if you want to do it. So the government sector is not just responding in the United States in terms of benefits corporation. India has, and I'm not Indian, but has a 2% rule where a certain amount of money has to be donated every year into the social sector space. I don't know if it's 2% of net revenues, probably, which I think is phenomenal. I understand that there's been a little bit of, there's some good feedback and there's some bad feedback, right? People are nodding their heads. Okay, good feedback, of course, is the idea of it is phenomenal, right? We're making sure that we're solving problems out there. The bad is that some people were saying, well, I was doing it anyway, and now everyone else is doing it, so they all look good. When I used to stand out, I looked really cool because I was the only one doing it. So
There are also interesting bookkeeping ways to make it happen. So.
yes, I'm sure there are interesting bookkeeping ways, right? There always are. So, you know, you are seeing stricter SEC reporting requirements, and so there's this whole trend now to say we have just been through way too much in our business world out there in terms of almost feeling defrauded as consumers out there and investors, and it's just time for change, which I think is phenomenal. And these are the two that I mentioned. So actually, the first one, which I really loved, was here in British Columbia, and they came up with something that patterns something similar to a corporate structure in the UK, and it's called a community contribution company, a C3. So obviously I don't know the law that well, but it looks pretty similar. It has reporting requirements, and it has a social purpose, as well as having a rate of return for the shareholders. So why is this important to you? Now, I particularly think this is important to women, and this is what I wanted to talk about here, now that we've gotten through the business part of this, is that there's never been a more important time for women to step into leadership roles. I mean, look what's going on out there, right? We're turning into values-based, and as women, I believe that we are all coming from values-based. Sometimes we don't know how to step up to the plate. We don't. And honestly, I know there's some great guys in here, but you guys sometimes have more swagger than we do, right? And it's hard. So, you know, I work with women and I say, you know, come on guys, let's figure out the life experiences that you bring to the table, and let's go back and let's take a look at the values that come from that. Because now is the time for us to speak our values and step into leadership roles. It's never been more important than today. Never. It's never been more important than right now. And finally, we have a chance. Why? This is what's going on out there. We are finally being set up for leadership roles where we can step into political offices, where we can step into board positions, where we can step into management roles, because they understand that they cannot survive as entities anymore unless they are values-based businesses. And there's no one better to speak values than we are. So it's, you know, I think it's a phenomenal time for women to step in, and I really want to encourage you to do that and think about that. And please call me if you're wondering how to do this. We all have our contact information. I love working with 2 or 3 different groups. There's the ones that are going, well, I really want to help, but I'm not quite sure how to help. We'll figure that out, because we are all a missing jigsaw piece to this universal puzzle, right? Then there's the social entrepreneurs that say, well, I want to be like Tom Shoes. I know I want to have a business that's a social purpose, but I don't know how to structure it with all this stuff up there. Call me. And then there's the companies that go, okay, we realize we get it now. We are a company and we can't bid anymore. So the bigger corporations like Dell or big manufacturing, they won't even talk to the smaller guys if they don't have these programs in place. They won't even speak with them. You can't even bid with them because they're not going to take the risk. So let's equalize the playing field so everybody gets to go play. And whether you're wanting to get into HR work, if you're in the training business or any other service, you've got to have these programs in place or it won't work. So that's my mission, to help equalize the playing field. And thank you guys for giving me the chance to talk about legal stuff.